A poor girl was left half buried in the Avalanche until a hunter rushed in shouting, "Hold on tight." Colorado Territory, 1879. The mountains stood like frozen guardians along the northern pass, their peaks crowned with snow that had fallen for 3 days straight without mercy. A narrow wagon trail cut through the canyon, treacherous even in summer, deadly in winter. Inside a canvas-covered wagon that creaked with every rut, a young woman sat pressed against the wooden sideboard, her body shaking from cold that had settled deep into her bones. Her name was Anna Corbett. She was 19 years old. Her dress was threadbare, patched at the elbows with fabric that didn't match. Her shawl had long since lost its warmth. Her fingernails were blackened with frostbite. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 5 days. The hunger was a constant ache, worse even than the cold that seeped through every layer of her thin clothing. Across from her sat her stepfather, Silas Corbett, a man whose face bore the scars of too many fights and too much whiskey. His breath stank of cheap rum even in the freezing air. He held the reins loosely, his eyes bloodshot and mean. He hadn't spoken to her since they left the mining camp 2 days ago, and Anna had learned long ago that his silence was worse than his shouting. When Silas was quiet, he was thinking, and his thoughts were never kind. When her mother died giving birth to a stillborn son the previous spring, Silas had kept Anna only because she could cook, mend, and haul water. But after he gambled away his claim and owed money to men who didn't forgive debts, he decided she was worth more sold than kept. He had tried to trade her to a saloon owner in Silver Creek. The man took one look at her hollow eyes and bony wrists and refused. "Too sickly," he said. "Won't last a month. Not worth the investment." Silas had cursed her for that, called her useless, a burden. He drank harder and grew meaner. He started leaving her outside at night, tied to a post like an animal, telling her she needed to toughen up if any man was going to want her. He stopped giving her food, unless she earned it by working from dawn until her hands bled. And when she stumbled or failed, he made sure she knew exactly how worthless she was. Now, as the wagon climbed higher into the pass, the temperature dropped and the wind picked up. Snow began to fall again, thick and blinding. The trail grew narrower. The wheels slipped on patches of ice hidden beneath fresh powder. Anna could feel the wagon tilting dangerously with each turn, the wooden frame groaning under the strain. She clutched the sideboard, her knuckles white, praying they wouldn't tip over the edge. Silas yanked the reins and brought the wagon to a halt. The sudden stop jolted Anna forward. She caught herself against the rough wood, splinters digging into her palms. He climbed down from the driver's seat, his boots crunching in the snow. He walked around to the back and threw open the canvas flap. The cold slammed into Anna like a fist. Her teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue. Blood pooled warm in her mouth before the cold turned it to copper. He grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out. She stumbled, her legs numb and weak. Her bare feet, wrapped only in strips of burlap that had long since soaked through, sank into the snow. The cold burned worse than fire. She gasped, her breath stolen by the wind. Ice crystals formed instantly on her eyelashes. Silas shoved her toward the edge of the trail, where the mountain dropped away into a steep ravine filled with jagged rocks and drifted snow. He didn't look at her. He just pointed down the slope with a hand that trembled not from cold, but from drink. His face was red, his eyes wild with something dark and final. "Get out," he said. Anna stared at him, her mind struggling to understand. Her voice came out small and cracked. "What? You heard me. Get out. I'm done dragging you around like a stone." She shook her head, fear flooding her chest. "Please, I'll work harder. I won't complain. I'll do anything you want." He cut her off with a bark of laughter, bitter and cold. "You think I care? You're worth nothing. Less than nothing. I'm not wasting another day feeding a mouth that brings me no coin. Your mother was a fool for keeping you, and I'm a bigger fool for not drowning you when I had the chance." The words hit her harder than any blow ever had. Anna felt something break inside her chest, something that had been barely holding together for months. She opened her mouth to speak, to beg, but no sound came out. He turned his back on her and climbed onto the wagon. He cracked the reins. The mules lurched forward. The wheels groaned against the frozen earth. Anna stumbled after him, her voice finally breaking free in a raw, desperate cry. "Silas, please! Don't leave me here. I'll die." He didn't stop. He didn't even look back. The wagon rolled away down the trail, disappearing into the curtain of falling snow. His voice echoed back faint and final. "Then die quiet." Anna stood there alone, the wind howling around her like a living thing. She tried to follow the wagon tracks, but the snow was too deep. Her legs gave out after only a few steps. She fell to her knees, gasping, her hands clutching at the frozen ground. Ice crystals cut into her palms. Blood seeped out, freezing almost instantly into tiny red beads. She tried to stand again, but her body refused. The cold was inside her now, spreading through her limbs like poison. Her fingers wouldn't close. Her feet had gone completely numb. She couldn't feel anything below her knees. She crawled toward a cluster of pines further up the slope, thinking maybe she could find shelter. Maybe she could dig into the snow and wait out the storm. But the snow was coming down harder, and the world around her blurred into white. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel, her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. She couldn't remember why she was crawling, couldn't remember where she was trying to go. All she knew was cold. Cold and darkness closing in. That was when she heard it. A deep rumble, low and distant like thunder, trapped inside the mountain. She looked up, her heart seizing with a terror more primal than anything she had ever known. High above her, a massive shelf of snow broke loose from the peak. It came down in a roaring wave, swallowing trees, rocks, everything in its path. The sound was deafening, primal, the voice of the mountain itself speaking in anger. Anna tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The avalanche hit her like a wall of stone. She was thrown forward, tumbling, the world spinning in a chaos of white and black. Her mouth filled with ice and dirt. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The weight of the snow crushed down on her, pressing the air from her lungs, burying her in darkness. Her last thought was of her mother's face, soft and kind, singing her to sleep when she was small. She clung to that memory as everything went black. When the roar finally stopped, there was only silence. Anna was pinned beneath a massive drift, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Only her head and one arm were visible above the snow. Her face was pale as death. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were closed. Snow continued to fall, slowly covering even those last traces of her. In another hour, she would be completely buried. In 2, she would be frozen solid. She couldn't move, couldn't feel her legs. The cold was absolute, final. She tried to call for help, but no sound came. Her strength was gone. She thought of her mother, of the garden they used to tend together back when her father was still alive. She remembered the songs her mother sang while kneading bread, the way she smelled of lavender and flour. She thought maybe dying wouldn't be so bad if it meant she could see her again. Maybe death was just going home. From the ridge above, a figure moved through the trees with the silence of a shadow. Ethan Wolfpaw had been tracking a bull elk for 2 days, following its trail through the high country. The elk was old, its tracks deep and deliberate, and Ethan knew it would lead him to better hunting grounds before winter tightened its grip completely. He was Modoc, raised in the forests of Northern California before his family was forced onto a reservation after the Modoc War ended in blood and betrayal. He had been only 12 when the soldiers came, when they marched his people at gunpoint across land that had belonged to them since the beginning of time. He had watched his uncle die from fever on that march, watched his grandmother collapse from exhaustion, watched the light go out of his mother's eyes. He had left that place years ago, choosing the life of a hunter and trapper over the slow death of confinement. His mother had been Modoc, his father a French trapper who had loved her, despite the hatred that existed between their worlds. Ethan carried both worlds in his blood, belonged fully to neither, and had made peace with that long ago. He knew these mountains better than most men knew their own hands. He had survived winters that killed seasoned frontiersmen. He respected the land, listened to it, read its signs the way other men read books. And today, the mountain was speaking. Something had changed. The air carried a warning, a tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He had heard the avalanche from a mile away, felt the tremor through the soles of his boots. The sound was unmistakable, the deep roar of tons of snow breaking free and crashing down the mountainside. He changed course immediately, moving toward the sound with quick, sure steps. His rifle was slung across his back, his hunting knife at his belt, but he knew neither would be of use against what he might find. Avalanches didn't care who they buried, but sometimes, if you were fast and lucky, you could pull someone out before the cold claimed them. Most men wouldn't bother. The risk was too high. Another slide could come at any moment, but Ethan had lost too many people to the mountain's hunger. He wouldn't let it take another without a fight. He reached the edge of the slide zone and scanned the devastation with practiced eyes. Snow covered everything, smooth and deceptive. Trees had been snapped like twigs, their broken trunks jutting up through the white. Boulders the size of wagons had been tossed aside like pebbles. Most people would see nothing but destruction, but Ethan saw the faint outline of something unnatural, a shape that didn't belong. A disturbance in the pattern, something dark against the white. He moved closer, his eyes narrowing, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. There, half buried in the drift, was a hand, small, pale, unmoving. The fingers were curled slightly, as if reaching for something that wasn't there, as if frozen in the act of grasping for life itself. He dropped to his knees and started digging, his gloved hands moving fast, scooping away the packed snow. It was dense, heavy, compressed by the force of the avalanche. Within seconds he uncovered a face. A girl, young. Her skin was ghostly white, her lips tinged with blue. She wasn't moving. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. For a moment he felt nothing and his jaw tightened. Then there it was, faint, barely there. But alive, he dug faster, clearing the snow from her shoulders, her chest, her waist. Her body was twisted, one leg bent beneath her at an angle that made him wince. He worked carefully, knowing that moving her too quickly could cause more damage, could sever something vital. But if he didn't get her out now, she'd freeze to death in minutes. The cold was already winning. He could see it in the color of her skin, the stillness of her chest, the ice forming on her eyelashes. When he finally freed her completely, he lifted her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. She was light, too light, like a bird with hollow bones. Her head lolled against his chest. Her breathing was shallow, barely a whisper. Ice crystals clung to her hair, her eyelashes, the thin fabric of her dress. He looked down into her face, pale and still as carved marble, and said the only thing that mattered. "Hold on tight." She didn't respond. Her eyes remained closed, but her fingers twitched just slightly against his coat. That tiny movement, that spark of life refusing to be extinguished, was enough. It told him she was still fighting, and if she was fighting, he would fight with her. Ethan turned and started moving, carrying her down the slope toward the tree line where the wind was less brutal. His cabin was 3 miles east, tucked into a sheltered valley beside a frozen creek. He could make it in an hour if he pushed hard. But the girl didn't have an hour. He could feel her body growing colder in his arms, her pulse weakening with every minute that passed. He needed to warm her now. He stopped at the edge of a pine grove and laid her down gently on a bed of needles that crunched beneath her weight. He stripped off his heavy fur coat, the one lined with beaver pelts that had kept him alive through countless winters, and wrapped it around her. He tucked it tight, covering every inch of exposed skin. He pulled off his wool scarf, thick and warm, and wound it around her head and neck. Then he removed his gloves and pressed his bare hands against her cheeks, trying to transfer whatever warmth he had left. Her skin was like ice, cold enough to burn. He cursed under his breath, not at her, but at the cruelty of whoever had left her out here. No one ended up buried in an avalanche by accident in weather like this. The trail wasn't safe, but it was passable if you knew what you were doing. Someone had brought her up here. Someone had abandoned her. He could see it in the way she was dressed. Thin fabric meant for mild weather, not mountain winters. She had burlap wrapped around her feet instead of boots. Her hands showed signs of hard labor, calluses and scars. This was someone who had been worked to the bone and then discarded. He lifted her again, this time cradling her against his chest to shield her from the wind that still howled through the trees. He moved fast, his boots crunching through the snow, his breath coming in steady clouds that hung in the freezing air. His body screamed with exhaustion, the weight of her combined with the altitude and the cold pushing him to his limits. But he didn't slow down. He had seen too many people die in these mountains. He wasn't going to let this girl be another one. Not today. Not while he still had strength in his legs and air in his lungs. The trees grew thicker as he descended into the valley. The wind died down to a whisper. The snow fell softer here, drifting like feathers instead of knives. His cabin came into view through the pines, a low structure built from hand-hewn logs, smoke rising from the stone chimney in a thin grey line. It sat beside a frozen creek, sheltered by a wall of pines that blocked the worst of the winter storms. He had built it with his own hands 5 years ago, log by log, and it had never failed him. He kicked the door open with his boot and carried her inside. The warmth hit him immediately, a wall of heat that made his frozen skin tingle and burn. The air was thick with the smell of burning cedar and dried herbs hanging from the rafters, sage and sweetgrass and wild mint. He laid her on the bed near the hearth, still wrapped in his coat. He added wood to the fire, thick split logs that caught quickly, stoking the flames until they roared and crackled and filled the small room with dancing light. Then he turned his attention back to the girl. He removed the coat carefully, checking her for injuries with hands that knew what to look for. Her right arm was bruised, purple and swollen, possibly sprained. Her legs were scraped and cut, blood dried in dark lines against pale skin, but nothing appeared broken. Her feet were in bad shape, the burlap wrappings soaked through, toes white with frostbite. The real danger was the cold. Hypothermia could kill, even after someone was brought inside. He had seen it before. People who seemed fine one moment, their hearts stopping the next as their bodies gave up the fight. He filled a pot with water from the bucket by the door and set it over the fire to warm. While it heated, he soaked strips of clean cloth in lukewarm water and pressed them gently against her hands and feet, warming them slowly. Too fast, and the shock could stop her heart. He worked methodically, carefully, the way his mother had taught him when he was young. "Patience saves lives," she used to say. "Haste buries them." Her eyelids fluttered. A faint groan escaped her lips, barely audible over the crackling of the fire. Ethan leaned closer, his voice low and steady, the tone he used with frightened animals. "You're safe now. You're inside. The cold can't reach you here." Her eyes opened just a sliver. They were grey, the color of storm clouds heavy with rain. They stared at him without recognition, without understanding. Fear flickered there, raw and animal, the fear of prey cornered by predator. She tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't respond. Then her eyes closed again, and her body went limp, consciousness slipping away like water through fingers. Ethan worked through the night without rest. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, layers of wool and fur, piled high until only her face was visible. He brewed tea from pine needles and wild ginger, the steam rising in fragrant clouds, and coaxed small sips past her lips when she stirred. He kept the fire burning high, feeding it constantly, the flames casting wild shadows on the log walls. And he stayed awake, watching her chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer to gods he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but he refused to close them. By dawn, her color had improved. The blue tint was gone from her lips, replaced by a faint pink. Her breathing was deeper, more regular, no longer the shallow gasps of someone teetering on the edge. She was still unconscious, but she was alive. That was enough for now. That was everything. Ethan sat back in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up to him like a wave crashing over his head. He looked at the girl, this stranger he had pulled from the snow, and wondered who she was, where she had come from, what her name was, and why someone had left her to die on a mountain pass in the middle of winter. Questions could wait. Right now she needed rest. And so did he. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Wind battered the walls, Snow piled against the door in drifts that would take hours to dig through. But inside the cabin the fire burned warm and steady, and two lives, one saved and one saving, shared the same fragile shelter against the cold darkness of the world. Anna woke to warmth she didn't recognize. For a moment, she thought she had died, and this was what came after, a place where pain stopped and cold couldn't reach. But then her body reminded her she was alive. Every muscle ached. Her head throbbed. Her throat felt raw, like she'd swallowed broken glass. She tried to move and gasped at the sharp pain that shot through her right arm. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light. She was inside somewhere, a small room built from logs. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across rough wooden walls. The air smelled of smoke and dried herbs. She was lying in a bed, buried under what felt like a mountain of blankets. She could barely move under their weight. Panic seized her chest. Where was she? How did she get here? The last thing she remembered was the avalanche, the crushing weight of snow, the certainty that she was going to die. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Her arms shook with the effort. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. A door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. Anna flinched, her breath catching. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying an armload of firewood. He kicked the door shut behind him and moved to the hearth without looking at her. He stacked the wood carefully beside the fire, then brushed the snow from his shoulders. Anna watched him with wide eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was dressed in buckskin and wool, his dark hair pulled back and tied with a strip of leather. His face was weathered, strong-featured, impossible to read. He moved with a quiet efficiency that spoke of someone who lived alone and preferred it that way. He finally looked at her. Their eyes met. Anna pressed herself back against the headboard, though there was nowhere to go. Her fingers gripped the edge of the blanket so tight her knuckles turned white. The man held up both hands, palms out, a gesture of peace. He didn't come closer. He just stood there by the fire, giving her space. When he spoke, his voice was low and calm, the kind of voice you'd use with a spooked horse. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." Anna said nothing. She couldn't find her voice. She just stared at him, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Men lied. Silas had taught her that. They said one thing and did another. They promised safety and delivered pain. The man seemed to understand her silence. He walked to the far side of the room, keeping his distance, and picked up a tin cup from the table. He filled it with water from a bucket and set it on the small stand beside the bed. Then he stepped back, putting the length of the room between them again. "You should drink. Slow sips. Your body needs it." Anna looked at the cup, then back at him. She didn't move. The man nodded as if he'd expected that response. He pulled a chair from the table and sat down, far enough away that he couldn't reach her even if he tried. He leaned back, relaxed, non-threatening. "My name is Ethan Wolfpaw. This is my cabin. I found you buried in an avalanche 2 days ago. You've been unconscious most of that time." 2 days. Anna's mind reeled. She'd been here for 2 days, with a stranger, while she was unconscious. Her stomach twisted with fear. She looked down at herself, checking. Her dress was still on, dirty and torn but intact. The blankets covered her to her chin. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing felt violated. Just sore and bruised and cold deep in her bones. Ethan must have seen the fear in her eyes, because he spoke again, his voice steady. "I didn't touch you except to warm you up and check for injuries. You were dying from the cold. Your arm is sprained, not broken. Your feet had frostbite, but I think you'll keep all your toes. You're lucky to be alive." Lucky. The word almost made her laugh. She didn't feel lucky. She felt scared and confused, and so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. But she was alive. Silas had left her to die, and somehow she was still alive. That had to count for something. She reached for the cup with her left hand, her right arm too painful to use. Her fingers trembled so badly she almost dropped it. Ethan started to Ryes, instinct telling him to help, but he stopped himself and sat back down. He understood she needed to do this herself. Anna managed to bring the cup to her lips and took a small sip. The water was cold and clean, the best thing she'd ever tasted. She took another sip, then another, until the cup was empty. Ethan stood and refilled it without being asked. He set it back on the stand and returned to his chair. There's stew in the pot over the fire. When you're ready, you should eat. You need your strength back. Anna wanted to ask him why. Why had he saved her? Why was he helping her? What did he want from her? But the words wouldn't come. Her throat was too tight, her fear too strong. She just pulled the blankets higher and watched him, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for him to show his true nature. But Ethan didn't move. He just sat there, patient and still. After a long silence, he spoke again. "I'm going to go check my traps. I'll be gone a few hours. There's food, water, firewood. The door isn't locked. If you want to leave, you can. But the nearest town is 15 miles south, and there's another storm coming. You wouldn't make it a mile in your condition." He stood and pulled on his heavy coat, the same one Anna vaguely remembered being wrapped in. He picked up his rifle and slung it across his back. At the door he paused and looked back at her. "I lost someone to these mountains once. Someone I should have saved but didn't. I'm not going to make that mistake again." Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Anna listened to his footsteps crunching through the snow, growing fainter until they disappeared completely. She was alone. The fire crackled. Wind whistled through the cracks in the walls. She looked at the door, unlocked just like he said. She could leave. She could try to run. But run where? Back to Silas? To another town where she had no money, no friends, nowhere to go? And Ethan was right. She could barely sit up without her head spinning. She'd never survive the cold. She was trapped here, not by locks or chains, but by circumstance and her own broken body. Anna lay back down, tears burning behind her eyes. She wouldn't cry. She'd promised herself after her mother died that she wouldn't waste tears anymore. Tears didn't change anything. They didn't make men kinder or the world softer. They just made you weak. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Questions circled like vultures. What was Ethan going to do with her? How long would he let her stay? And when he got tired of feeding a useless mouth, would he throw her out like Silas had? The thoughts chased each other in endless loops until exhaustion finally pulled her under. When she woke again, the light had changed. The fire had burned lower, and Ethan was back, moving quietly around the cabin. He hung his coat on a peg and set his rifle above the door. He had 3 rabbits slung over his shoulder, already skinned and cleaned. He took them outside to hang in the cold, then came back in and washed his hands in a basin. He noticed she was awake but didn't say anything. He just went about his business, adding wood to the fire, stirring the pot of stew, pulling out a knife and a piece of wood. He sat in his chair and began to carve, slow, careful strokes that created thin curls of wood that fell to the floor. The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. It was the silence of 2 people who didn't know what to say to each other yet. Anna's stomach growled, loud enough that Ethan heard it. He set down his carving and stood. He ladled stew into a wooden bowl and brought it to her along with a spoon. He set it on the stand and stepped back. "Rabbit and wild onions. It's not fancy, but it's hot." Anna looked at the bowl, then at him. Slowly, carefully, she reached for it with her left hand. The bowl was warm against her palm. She brought it to her lap and took a tentative bite. The stew was simple, but it was the first real food she'd had in days. She ate slowly, her stomach not used to being full. Ethan returned to his chair and his carving, giving her space. When she finished, she set the bowl back on the stand. Her voice came out rusty and quiet, barely more than a whisper. "Thank you." Ethan looked up from his work. He nodded once, acknowledging her words. "You're welcome." Another long silence. Anna knew she should say more, explain who she was, how she ended up on that mountain, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him. The shame of it was too heavy. Being abandoned by the only family she had left, being so worthless that even Silas didn't want her. The words stuck in her throat like thorns. Ethan seemed to sense her struggle. He set down his carving and looked at her directly, his dark eyes steady and calm. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. Whatever happened, whatever brought you up that mountain, it's your business. You can stay here until you're well enough to leave. No questions asked." Anna felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been holding back a flood. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her face away, ashamed. She didn't want him to see her cry, didn't want him to see how broken she was. But Ethan didn't mock her, didn't tell her to stop. He just stood and walked to the far side of the cabin, giving her privacy. He busied himself with checking supplies, organizing shelves, anything to let her have her moment without an audience. And somehow, that small act of kindness made the tears come harder. Anna cried for her mother, dead and buried in ground too frozen to dig properly. She cried for the girl she used to be, the one who believed the world could be good if you just worked hard enough. She cried for the cold and the hunger and the years of Silas's cruelty. She cried until there was nothing left, until she was empty and exhausted, and her throat ached from the sobs she'd tried to hold back. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When she finally stopped, when the tears dried up and her breathing steadied, Ethan still had his back turned. He was looking out the small window at the darkening sky. His voice was quiet when he spoke. "Storm's coming in. Going to be a bad one. We'll be snowed in for a few days at least." Anna wiped her face with the edge of the blanket. Her voice was raw, but steadier. "I'm sorry." Ethan turned around. He looked confused. "For what? For crying? For being trouble?" He shook his head. "You're not trouble. And crying isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps you sane." He moved back to his chair and picked up his carving again. The knife moved in smooth, practiced strokes. Anna watched his hands, strong and scarred from years of hard work. She wondered what his story was, why a man like him lived alone in the mountains, what he'd lost that made him understand grief so well. The wind picked up outside, howling around the corners of the cabin. Snow began to fall, thick and fast, visible through the window. Ethan had been right about the storm. Within an hour, the world outside had disappeared into a wall of white. The cabin felt smaller, more isolated, like they were the only two people left in the world. As night fell, Ethan made more stew, and they ate in silence. Anna was getting used to the quiet now. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was just the way things were between them. When she finished eating, Ethan took the bowl and washed it. He added more wood to the fire and checked that the door was secure. Then he pulled a thick bedroll from under the table and laid it out on the floor on the far side of the room, as far from Anna's bed as possible. He stretched out on it, fully clothed, his knife within reach. He didn't look at her. He just closed his eyes. "Sleep if you can. I'll keep the fire going." Anna lay back down, pulling the blankets up to her chin. She watched the fire dance and listened to the storm rage outside. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something close to safe. It was a fragile feeling, easily broken, but it was there. And for tonight that was enough. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Ethan would wake before dawn, stoke the fire, and check his traps if the weather allowed. Anna would wake to the sound of him moving around, careful and quiet. He would leave food for her within reach, and then busy himself with work that needed doing. Sharpening tools, mending leather, carving pieces of wood into useful things, spoons and bowls and handles for knives. Anna started to heal. The pain in her arm faded from sharp to dull. The cuts on her legs scabbed over and began to close. Her feet, which had scared her with their white bloodless color, slowly returned to pink. She could stand now without her legs giving out. She could walk across the room without needing to rest. And as her body healed, her fear began to ease. Ethan never raised his voice, never came too close, never made demands or asked for anything she wasn't ready to give. He treated her with a careful respect that she'd never experienced from any man. It confused her at first. She kept waiting for the mask to slip, for him to show his true nature. But it never did. One morning, Anna woke to find Ethan already gone. A note was left on the table in rough handwriting. Gone to check the creek. Back by noon. There was bread wrapped in cloth, still warm from the fire. Anna ate it slowly, then stood and looked around the cabin with new eyes. She'd been here almost a week, and Ethan had done everything. Cooked every meal, tended the fire, cleaned up after her. It wasn't right. She needed to do something. She needed to prove she wasn't just a burden. She started small. She tidied the blankets on the bed, folding them neatly. She swept the floor with a broom she found leaning in the corner. She washed the dishes that had piled up in the basin. Her arm protested with every movement, but she pushed through the pain. By the time Ethan returned, the cabin was clean, and a pot of snow was melting over the fire for washing. Ethan stopped in the doorway, surprise flickering across his face. He looked around the cabin, then at Anna. "You didn't have to do this." Anna stood by the fire, her hands clasped in front of her. She lifted her chin slightly, trying to look stronger than she felt. "You saved my life. You've been feeding me and keeping me warm. The least I can do is help." Ethan set down the firewood he was carrying. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "All right, but don't push yourself too hard. You're still healing." From that day on, they worked together. Anna would prepare simple meals while Ethan hunted and checked his traps. She would mend his shirts while he carved new tools. They moved around each other in the small space with an easy awareness, never getting in each other's way. And slowly, carefully, they began to talk. It started with small things. Comments about the weather. Questions about how to prepare certain foods. But gradually, the conversations grew longer. Ethan told her about the mountains, about tracking animals, and reading signs in the snow. Anna found herself asking questions, genuinely curious. She'd spent her whole life surviving, never learning. Now, for the first time, someone was teaching her without expecting anything in return. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Ethan carved, while Anna worked on mending a tear in one of his shirts. The silence was comfortable now, familiar. Then Anna spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "My stepfather left me on that mountain. He said I wasn't worth the trouble of keeping." Ethan's knife paused mid-stroke. He didn't look up. He just waited, letting her take her time. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she pushed the needle through the fabric. "My mother died last spring. After that, he tried to sell me. Nobody would buy me. So he took me up the pass and threw me out of the wagon. Told me to die quiet." The words hung in the air. Ethan set down his carving and looked at her. His eyes were dark and serious. "That man is a coward and a fool. What he did to you, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his lack of it." Anna's throat tightened. She blinked hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "I don't even know why you saved me. You don't know me. I'm nobody." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. His voice was firm but gentle. "You're not nobody. You're someone who survived something that should have killed you. You're someone who's stronger than you think. And you're someone who deserves a chance to live, same as anyone else." Anna looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes she'd never seen directed at her before. Respect. He respected her. Not for what she could do for him, but just for surviving, for still being here. It was such a foreign concept that she didn't know what to do with it. She looked back down at her sewing, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you. For everything." Ethan picked up his carving again. "You don't have to thank me. Just get well. That's enough." Outside, the wind howled and snow continued to fall. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. The walls didn't feel so close anymore. The silence didn't feel so heavy. And for the first time since her mother died, Anna felt something she'd thought was lost forever. She felt hope. 3 weeks had passed since the avalanche, and the cabin had become something Anna never thought she'd have again. A home. Not in the way most people understood the word, but in the quiet moments between tasks, in the rhythm of shared meals, in the unspoken understanding that had grown between her and Ethan like moss on stone. The winter had deepened its hold on the mountains. Snow piled higher against the cabin walls each day, and the cold bit with teeth sharp enough to kill the careless. But inside, warmth prevailed. Anna had regained her strength, her movements no longer hesitant or pained. Her arm had healed completely, and the frostbite scars on her feet were fading to pale marks she could almost ignore. She had taken over most of the cooking, finding satisfaction in creating meals from the simple provisions Ethan kept. Dried venison, cornmeal, wild herbs, beans stored in clay jars. She learned to make bread that rose properly, stew that warmed from the inside out, and tea from pine needles that tasted of the forest itself. Ethan never complained, never criticized, just ate what she made with quiet appreciation. This morning, Anna stood at the table kneading dough, her hands working the mixture with practiced rhythm. Ethan sat by the fire cleaning his rifle, the metal parts spread out on a cloth before him. The familiar smell of gun oil mixed with the yeasty scent of rising bread. Outside, a raven called from somewhere in the pines, its voice harsh and lonely. Anna had been thinking about something for days now, and the words had been building pressure inside her chest like water behind a dam. She kept her eyes on the dough as she spoke. "I need to ask you something." Ethan looked up from his work, his hands stilling. "Go ahead," she took a breath, gathering courage. "Why did you really save me? You said you lost someone, but you never told me who. Or why it matters so much?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. He set down the rifle part he'd been holding and stared into the fire. Anna thought maybe she'd pushed too far, asked something she had no right to know. But then he spoke, his voice low and heavy with old pain. "Her name was Sarah. She was my wife." Anna's hands stopped moving. She hadn't expected that. Ethan had never mentioned being married, never spoke of any woman. She turned to face him, flour dusting her fingers. Ethan didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the flames. "We met 7 years ago in a trading post near the California border. She was traveling with a missionary group teaching Modoc children to read. I was bringing in furs to trade. She had this way about her, like she saw past all the walls people build. She saw me, really saw me, and didn't turn away." He picked up a stick and poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. "We married that winter, built this cabin together, log by log. She wanted a life away from towns and their judgments. People looked at us and saw something wrong, a white woman with a half-breed. But up here, none of that mattered. We were just us." Anna moved to sit in the chair across from him, her bread forgotten. She'd never heard Ethan speak more than a few sentences at a time. Now words were pouring out of him like a river breaking through ice. 3 years ago, there was a fever that went through the settlements. Sarah went down to help at a mission clinic, said people were dying and needed anyone who could tend the sick. I told her not to go, told her it was dangerous, but she had a good heart, couldn't turn away from suffering. His voice roughened. She caught the fever. By the time I got word and rode down there, she was already gone. They'd buried her 2 days before. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell her that she was right to go, that her kindness was worth more than my fear. Anna felt tears sting her eyes. She understood loss, but hearing Ethan's pain laid bare made her own grief seem less lonely somehow. "I'm sorry," Ethan shook his head. "After she died, I came back here and tried to keep going, but everything reminded me of her. The garden she planted, the curtains she sewed, the chair she sat in. I almost left, almost abandoned this place and everything in it. Then winter came, and I realized something." He finally looked at Anna, his dark eyes reflecting firelight. "Sarah saved people because she believed every life had value. She wouldn't want me running from the only home we built together. So I stayed, and when I found you in that snow, half dead and alone, I heard her voice in my head saying what she always said. Everyone deserves a chance, Ethan. Don't let fear make you cruel. So I gave you that chance. Not for me, for her." Anna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of flour across her cheek. "She sounds like she was a good woman, the best I ever knew," Ethan said quietly. "She taught me that strength isn't just about surviving. It's about helping others survive too. You remind me of her sometimes. The way you keep going even when everything's been taken from you. The way you find reasons to wake up and try again." Anna looked down at her hands, not knowing what to say to that. She'd never thought of herself as strong. She'd always been the one who needed saving, who couldn't make it on her own. But maybe Ethan saw something she didn't. Maybe survival itself was a kind of strength. The conversation settled into comfortable silence. Ethan went back to cleaning his rifle, and Anna returned to her bread. But something had changed between them. The air felt lighter, like a burden had been shared and thereby lessened. Anna understood now why Ethan had helped her, and why he'd been so careful to give her space and respect. He wasn't just saving her, he was honoring the memory of someone he'd loved and lost. That afternoon, Ethan announced he needed to check his trapline before another storm hit. The weather had been clear for 2 days, a rare window in the relentless winter. He'd be gone until evening, maybe longer if the trails were bad. Anna watched him prepare, packing supplies and checking his gear with methodical precision. Before he left, he paused at the door. "There's a shotgun above the mantel. It's loaded. If anyone comes while I'm gone, anyone at all, you don't open that door. You hear me?" Anna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "You think someone might come?" Ethan's expression was serious. These mountains attract all kinds. Most are decent folk just trying to survive, but some are running from something, and those are the ones you need to watch for. "I'm not trying to scare you. Just want you prepared." Anna nodded, her throat tight. Ethan seemed to sense her fear. His voice softened. "You'll be fine. I'll be back before dark. Keep the fire going and the door barred." Then he was gone, his figure disappearing into the white landscape like a shadow swallowed by snow. Anna stood at the window watching until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she turned back to the cabin, suddenly aware of how alone she was. She spent the afternoon keeping busy. She finished the bread and set it to bake in the Dutch oven buried in the coals. She mended a tear in one of the blankets. She organized the shelves, checking supplies and making mental notes of what was running low. The work kept her hands occupied, but her mind kept drifting to the shotgun above the mantel. The sun was starting to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold when Anna heard it. The sound of horses, multiple horses moving slowly through the deep snow. Her heart jumped into her throat. She moved to the window and peered out through the gap in the shutters. 3 men on horseback were approaching the cabin. They looked rough, their clothes layered and dirty, their faces hidden behind thick beards and scarves. One of them pointed at the cabin, and they changed direction, heading straight for the door. Anna's hands shook as she grabbed the shotgun from above the mantel. It was heavier than she expected, cold and solid in her grip. She'd never fired a gun before, but she'd watched Silas load his rifle enough times to understand the basics. She checked the chamber. Loaded just like Ethan said. She positioned herself away from the door, the gun raised and pointed. The knock came hard and demanding. "Hello in there!" We saw smoke. "We're looking for shelter from the cold." Anna's voice came out steadier than she felt. "The cabin's occupied. Move on." There was a pause. Then laughter, harsh and mocking. "That's a woman's voice, boys." "Sounds like she's all alone too." Another voice, rougher. "Come on now, miss. We don't mean no harm. Just need to warm up and rest our horses. Open up and we'll be on our way come morning." Anna's grip tightened on the shotgun. "I said move on. There's nothing for you here." The door handle rattled. Someone was testing it, checking if it was barred. Anna's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "This door opens, I start shooting. You hear me? I've got a shotgun and I know how to use it." More laughter. "Easy now. No need for threats. We're just cold and tired." But their tone had changed. It was darker now, with an edge that made Anna's skin crawl. She recognized that tone. She'd heard it from the men Silas had tried to sell her to, the ones who looked at her like she was property instead of a person. One of the men spoke again, and this time there was no pretense of friendliness. "Listen here, girl. We can do this easy or we can do this hard. But that door's coming open either way. You alone up here with no man to protect you? That's just bad luck." Anna backed up another step, her finger near the trigger. Fear coursed through her veins like ice water, but underneath it was something else. Anger. She'd survived being abandoned to die in an avalanche. She'd clawed her way back from death itself. She wasn't going to let these men take what she'd fought so hard to keep. The door shook as someone threw their weight against it. The bar held but barely. Anna raised the shotgun higher, aiming at chest height. Her voice came out hard and cold. "Next one who touches that door gets a belly full of buckshot. I won't warn you again." Then from outside a new sound. A rifle shot, sharp and clear, echoing off the mountains. The men at the door cursed and scrambled. Anna heard boots crunching through snow, horses neighing, shouts of confusion. Ethan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You got 10 seconds to get on those horses and ride out of here. After that, I start aiming to kill instead of warn." Anna's knees nearly gave out with relief. She stayed where she was, the shotgun still raised, listening to the men argue among themselves. One of them, bolder or stupider than the others, challenged Ethan. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you, friend. Odds ain't in your favor." Ethan's response was calm and utterly without fear. "I'm Marduk. I was tracking deer before you could walk. I've already got all 3 of you in my sights. The one on the left has a torn coat sleeve. The one in the middle rides a paint horse with a white blaze. And you, the one talking, you've got a scar across your right hand. I can see you clear as day. Now ride out or I put you down where you stand." There was a long, tense silence. Then the sound of men mounting horses, cursing under their breath, hoofbeats fading into the distance. Anna didn't move until she heard Ethan's voice at the door. "Anna, it's me. You can open up." She set the shotgun down with shaking hands and lifted the bar. The door swung open, and there was Ethan, his rifle in one hand, his face hard as stone. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, dropping the bar back into place. Then he turned to her. Anna's carefully held composure shattered. She threw herself at him without thinking, her arms wrapping around his chest, her face pressed against his coat. She was shaking, couldn't stop shaking, the fear finally breaking through now that the danger had passed. They were going to break in. "They were going to—" "I know," Ethan said quietly. His free arm came around her, holding her steady. "But they didn't. You're safe." They stood like that for a long moment, Anna clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. Gradually, her shaking subsided. She became aware of what she was doing, how she was pressed against him, and stepped back quickly. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize," Ethan said. He set his rifle aside and looked at her seriously. "You did good. You held them off until I got back. That took courage." Anna wiped her eyes, angry at the tears that wouldn't stop falling. "I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs doing even when you are—" He moved to the window and looked out, scanning the darkening landscape. "They won't come back tonight. They know I'm here now, and they're cowards at heart. But we need to be careful. Men like that travel in packs, and they remember grudges." Anna's stomach churned with new fear. "Do you think they'll come back?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "Not likely. They're probably drifters heading south before the worst of winter sets in. But I'll keep watch tonight just in case." He turned back to her, and his expression softened. "You handled yourself well. Most people would have panicked or given in. You stood your ground." Anna looked at the shotgun, still lying on the table where she'd set it. "I didn't know if I could actually pull the trigger, but you were willing to. That's what matters." That night, Anna couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made her jump. Every creak of the cabin settling made her heart race. Ethan sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, keeping watch like he'd promised. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows. Around midnight, Anna gave up trying to sleep. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and moved to sit in the chair near Ethan. He glanced at her but said nothing, just made room. They sat in silence, watching the darkness beyond the window. Finally, Anna spoke. "Do you ever get tired of it? The constant vigilance? Never being able to fully relax?" Ethan considered the question. It's the price of living out here. The mountains don't forgive mistakes, and neither do the kind of men who hide in them. But it's still better than living in a place where you have to pretend to be something you're not. Anna understood that. She'd spent her whole life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, useful enough to earn the right to exist. Out here in this cabin with this man, she didn't have to pretend. Or she could just be, "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming back when you did." Ethan looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting firelight. "I'll always come back. Long as you're here, this cabin isn't empty. And an empty cabin is just logs and stone. But a home is something worth protecting." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to name. Anna pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and watched the snow fall beyond the window. Outside, the world was cold and dangerous. But inside, sitting beside Ethan in the quiet darkness, she felt something she'd been afraid to acknowledge. She felt like she belonged. Spring came slowly to the mountains, reluctant and uncertain. The snow began to melt in patches, revealing brown earth and the first brave shoots of green, pushing through frozen ground. Streams that had been silent under ice began to sing again, their water cold and clear as it rushed down from the peaks. The air still held winter's bite, but there were moments now when the sun felt warm on Anna's face. Promising better days ahead, she stood outside the cabin, breathing in air that didn't hurt her lungs for the first time in months. Her hair had grown longer, hanging past her shoulders in waves she'd stopped trying to tame. Her hands were rough from work but strong. The gaunt hollows in her cheeks had filled out. She looked healthy, alive in a way she hadn't been when Ethan first pulled her from the snow. 4 months had passed since the avalanche. 4 months of learning how to live instead of just survive. Ethan had taught her to read animal tracks, to identify edible plants, to move quietly through the forest. She taught herself to find joy in small things. The smell of bread baking, the warmth of the fire, the sound of Ethan's voice reading aloud from the one book he owned. A worn copy of frontier poetry his wife had loved. They'd fallen into a partnership that felt natural as breathing. Ethan would hunt and trap while Anna tended the cabin and small garden plot they'd started preparing for planting. They'd share meals and conversation, their talks ranging from practical matters to deeper things. Memories of people they'd lost, dreams they'd stopped believing in, fears they'd learned to carry, but lately something had shifted. Anna caught Ethan watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. And she found herself noticing things about him she'd been too scared or too broken to see before. The way his hands moved with such careful precision, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to the horses, the way he always made sure she ate before he did. She didn't know what to do with these feelings. They frightened her more than the men who'd tried to break down the door, because those men she understood. Violence and cruelty made sense in the world she'd known, but kindness without expectation, respect without condition, companionship that asked for nothing but presence. These were foreign territories she had no map for. Anna was pulling weeds from the garden plot when she heard horses approaching. Her body tensed instinctively, but Ethan emerged from the cabin with his rifle, his posture alert but not alarmed. 2 riders came into view, both wearing badges that caught the sunlight. The older of the 2, a man with silver hair and a weathered face, raised his hand in greeting. "Morning. We're looking for Ethan Wolfpaw. Got word he lives up this way." Ethan stepped forward, rifle lowered but ready. "I'm Wolfpaw. What's your business?" The marshal dismounted, his movements slow and deliberate, showing he meant no threat. "Name's Marshal Hewitt. This is Deputy Banks. We're tracking a man named Silas Corbett. He's wanted for theft and assault down in Silver Creek. Wondering if you've seen him pass through." Anna's blood turned to ice. The trowel fell from her hand, hitting the dirt with a dull thud. Both lawmen turned to look at her, and she saw recognition dawn in the marshal's eyes. He'd seen her before, back when Silas had dragged her through town trying to sell her. The marshal's voice softened. "Miss Corbett, we heard what happened to your mother. I'm sorry for your loss. We've been looking for your stepfather for some time now. He owes money to some dangerous people, and he's been stealing to pay his debts. Last we heard, he was heading north toward the pass. Anna found her voice, though it shook. He's not my stepfather anymore. He left me to die in an avalanche 4 months ago. If you find him, I don't want to know about it. The marshal's expression hardened. He left you in that avalanche? The one that buried the North Trail? Yes, Anna said simply. There was no emotion in her voice now, just flat certainty. He threw me out of his wagon and told me to die quiet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Then he drove away. Deputy Banks cursed under his breath. Marshal Hewitt's jaw tightened. That's attempted murder. We'll add it to the charges. Miss Corbett, if we catch him, you'll need to testify. Anna shook her head. I have nothing more to say to that man. Not in a courtroom, not anywhere. He's dead to me. Ethan stepped closer to Anna, a subtle movement that put him between her and the lawman. His voice was calm but firm. She's been through enough. If you need a statement, I'll give you one. I'm the one who found her half buried and nearly frozen. I can testify to her condition and what it took to keep her alive. The marshal looked between them, understanding passing across his face. I see. Well, Mr. Wolfpaw, we'd appreciate any information you can provide. And Miss Corbett, you should know that Silas's debts don't transfer to you. Whatever he owed, it died with his claim to you as family. You're free and clear. The words should have brought relief, but Anna felt nothing. She'd stopped thinking of herself as part of Silas's world months ago. This was just confirming what she already knew in her heart. The marshal remounted his horse. We'll be moving on. If Corbett shows up here, you send word to Silver Creek. He's dangerous, especially when he's been drinking. Don't take any chances. After the lawman rode away, Anna stood motionless in the garden, staring at nothing. Ethan approached slowly, giving her space to process. You all right? Anna turned to look at him. I don't know what I am. I thought I'd feel something if I heard about Silas again. Anger maybe or fear. But I just feel empty. That's not emptiness, Ethan said quietly. That's freedom. You don't owe him your emotions anymore. Not even your hate. Anna considered that. Maybe he was right. Maybe the absence of feeling wasn't numbness, but release. She'd carried Silas's cruelty for so long it had become part of her weight. Perhaps letting it go meant there was nothing left where it used to be. She bent down and picked up the trowel, returning to her work. Ethan watched her for a moment, then went back to chopping wood. The rhythm of their tasks resumed, the interruption absorbed and set aside. But something had changed. Anna had been reminded that her past still existed out there, hunting for the man who'd tried to kill her, and that meant it could find her too. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Anna lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin. Ethan's steady breathing from his bedroll across the room. The pop and hiss of dying embers, the wind moving through the pines. Sounds that had become home. She thought about what the marshal had said, that she was free and clear. But was she really? She had no money, no family, nowhere to go. She was living in Ethan's cabin, eating his food, dependent on his protection. What kind of freedom was that? The thought gnawed at her until she couldn't bear it anymore. She sat up, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Ethan, are you awake? There was a pause, then his voice came through the darkness. I am now. What's wrong? Anna hesitated, gathering her courage. I need to know something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She heard him shift, sitting up. All right, why am I still here? I'm well now. I can walk, work, take care of myself. But I'm still living in your cabin, taking your supplies, giving nothing back of real value. Why haven't you told me to leave? The silence that followed felt heavy. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Is that what you want? To leave? I don't know what I want, Anna admitted. I just don't understand why you'd want me to stay. I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer you. She heard movement, then the strike of a match. Soft light bloomed as Ethan lit the lantern on the table. He was sitting on the edge of his bedroll, his hair loose around his shoulders, his expression serious. Come here. Anna stood and moved to the table, sitting in the chair across from him. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, making him look older, more worn. He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words. "When Sarah died," he began, "this cabin became a tomb. I kept everything exactly as she'd left it. Her clothes in the trunk, her books on the shelf, her garden tools by the door. I thought if I preserved it all perfectly, I could keep her here somehow. But all I did was turn a home into a shrine." He looked at Anna directly. "Then I found you. And at first, yes, I saved you for Sarah, because she would have wanted me to. But as you healed, as you started moving around this cabin, cooking and cleaning and filling it with life again, something changed. This place stopped being a tomb. It became a home again. Not Sarah's home. Not my home. Our home." Anna's breath caught. "Ethan," he held up a hand. "I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I'm just telling you why I want you to stay. Because you make this place feel alive again. And maybe, if I'm being honest, you make me feel alive again too." The words hung between them, honest and raw. Anna felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I was. Someone's burden, someone's property. I don't know how to just be a person who's wanted for existing." Ethan leaned forward, his dark eyes intense in the lamplight. "Then learn. I'll teach you, same way I taught you to track and build fires and read the weather. Being valued isn't something you have to earn. It's something you deserve just by being here, by being you." A tear slid down Anna's cheek. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail? Then you fail and you try again. That's all any of us can do." Anna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I want to stay. I'm just afraid of what that means. It means you have a home as long as you want one. It means you have someone who'll stand beside you when trouble comes. It means you're not alone anymore." The simplicity of it, the honest directness, broke something open in Anna's chest. She'd been waiting for conditions, for demands, for the price that always came due. But Ethan was offering something she'd never had before. Partnership without ownership. Companionship without obligation. A place in the world that was hers, not because she'd earned it, but because someone had chosen to make room for her. She stood and moved around the table. Ethan looked up at her, question in his eyes. Anna reached out and took his hand, holding it between both of hers. His skin was warm and calloused, scarred from years of hard work. She met his gaze and saw her own hope reflected back. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me a reason to keep living." Ethan's fingers closed gently around hers. "You gave yourself that reason. You fought to survive when most people would have given up. I just gave you a place to do it." They stayed like that, hands joined, the lamplight flickering between them. Outside, an owl called from the darkness. Inside, two people who'd been broken by loss began to understand that broken things could still be beautiful, could still be whole in ways that mattered. The next morning brought news that shattered their fragile peace. A rider came at dawn, a young trapper Ethan knew from previous trading seasons. His horse was lathered with sweat, his face tight with urgency. "Wolfpaw," he called out, swinging down from the saddle. "There's trouble coming your way. That man Silas Corbett, the one the marshal was hunting, he's holed up in an old mining shack about 5 miles east of here. Word is he's drunk and angry and talking about unfinished business." Anna's blood ran cold. Ethan's expression hardened to stone. "How many men with him? 2, maybe 3. Hard to say. But he's been asking about this cabin, about whether anyone's seen a girl matching Anna's description. Someone must have told him she's here." Anna felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Silas was coming. The man who'd tried to kill her was still hunting her, still believing he had some claim to her life. She thought she was free, but the past had teeth, and it wasn't done with her yet. Ethan turned to the trapper. "How much time do we have? Hard to say. Could be today, could be tomorrow. But he's coming. That much is certain." After the trapper left, Ethan began preparing. He checked his weapons, loaded extra ammunition, barred the shutters. Anna watched him work, her mind racing. She could run, try to get to town before Silas found her. But where would she go? And what kind of life would that be, always running, always looking over her shoulder? No, she was done running. done being prey. If Silas wanted to finish what he'd started on that mountain, she'd face him. But this time, she wouldn't face him alone. She picked up the shotgun from above the mantel and began checking it, her movements sure and steady. Ethan looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Anna, I'm not leaving," she said firmly, "and I'm not hiding. This is my home now. If he comes for me, he comes through both of us." Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but we do this smart. No heroics. We protect each other, and we protect this place." "Agreed. Agreed." They spent the day fortifying the cabin, preparing for a siege that might never come or might arrive with the next sunset. And as they worked side by side, Anna realized something. She wasn't the same girl who'd been thrown from a wagon and left to freeze. That girl had died in the avalanche. The woman who'd survived was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd finally found something worth fighting for. As darkness fell, they waited. The cabin was silent, except for the crackle of the fire. Their weapons were loaded and ready. And somewhere in the mountains, a ghost from Anna's past was riding closer, bringing with him one final test of everything she'd learned about survival, strength, and the courage it takes to claim your own life. Dawn broke cold and grey over the mountains, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. Anna stood at the window, her fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. She hadn't slept, neither had Ethan. They'd taken turns keeping watch through the night, but no one had come. The waiting was worse than any confrontation could be. Ethan sat at the table, methodically checking his rifle for the third time. His movements were calm and practiced, but Anna could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. He glanced up at her. "You should eat something." "Keep your strength up." Anna shook her head. "I can't. My stomach won't hold anything right now." He stood and moved to her side, looking out at the grey morning. "When this is over, when Silas is dealt with one way or another, what do you want to do? Stay here, move on?" "You've never said." The question caught Anna off guard. She'd been so focused on surviving the immediate threat that she hadn't let herself think about after. "I don't know. I never thought I'd have choices to make. For so long, other people decided everything for me. Where I went, what I did, whether I lived or died. The idea that I could choose my own path, it feels impossible." Ethan turned to face her fully. "It's not impossible. It's your right. And whatever you choose, wherever you want to go, I'll help you get there. You're not trapped here." Anna looked at him, this man who'd saved her life and asked for nothing in return, who'd given her shelter and safety, and something she'd never had before, genuine kindness. "What if I chose to stay? What if I wanted to build a life here, in this cabin, in these mountains?" Something shifted in Ethan's expression, hope flickering in his dark eyes. "Then I'd say this cabin could use someone permanent. Someone who wants to be here, not because they have nowhere else to go, but because they choose it." Anna set down her coffee cup and turned to face him completely. "I choose it. I choose this place. And I choose." She was cut off by the sound of horses. Multiple horses moving fast through the trees. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Anna picked up the shotgun, her heart hammering but her hands steady. Through the shutters, they could see 4 riders approaching, spreading out as they neared the cabin. Silas Corbett sat on the lead horse, his face red and bloated, his eyes wild with drink and rage. The 3 men with him looked hard and mean, the kind who'd do anything for money and wouldn't lose sleep over it. Silas raised his hand, and the riders stopped about 30 yards from the cabin. His voice carried across the clearing, slurred but loud. "Anna, I know you're in there, girl. Come on out. We got business to finish." Anna moved to the door, but Ethan caught her arm. "Don't. That's what he wants. We stay inside. We have the advantage." Silas called out again. "You hear me, girl? I came all this way to collect what's mine. Your mother's dead, so that makes you my property. And I found a buyer who'll pay good money even for damaged goods." Rage flooded through Anna, hot and clarifying. She shook off Ethan's hand and threw open the door, stepping out onto the porch with the shotgun raised. "I'm not your property, Silas. I stopped being yours the moment you left me to die." Silas's face twisted into something ugly. "You ungrateful little witch. I fed you, kept a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me. Running off with some half-breed and playing house?" Ethan appeared beside Anna, his rifle aimed at Silas's chest. His voice was cold as winter ice. "You've got 10 seconds to turn those horses around and ride out. After that, I start shooting." Silas laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You think I'm scared of you? There's 4 of us and 2 of you. We'll burn this cabin to the ground and take what's mine." One of the men with Silas shifted in his saddle, clearly uncomfortable. "Silas, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Silas snarled. He pulled a pistol from his belt, waving it unsteadily. "Anna, you got one chance. Come with me peaceful, and I'll let your friend here live. Fight me and I'll make sure he dies slow." Anna's finger moved to the trigger. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "I'd rather die free than live one more day under your control." "You want me, Silas? Come and take me." Time seemed to slow. Silas's face contorted with fury. He raised his pistol, pointing it at Anna. Ethan's rifle cracked, the shot echoing off the mountains. Silas jerked backward, the pistol falling from his hand. His horse reared, throwing him to the ground. The other 3 men reached for their weapons. Anna fired the shotgun, the recoil slamming into her shoulder. One man cried out, clutching his arm. Ethan fired again, and another rider's horse bolted, throwing its rider. The 3rd man, seeing how quickly things had turned, yanked his horse around and fled into the trees. Silas was on the ground, clutching his shoulder where Ethan's bullet had struck. Blood seeped between his fingers. He tried to crawl toward his fallen pistol, but Ethan stepped off the porch and kicked it away. He stood over Silas, his rifle pointed at the man's head. "Give me one reason," Ethan said quietly. "Just one reason why I shouldn't end you right now." Silas looked up at him, fear finally replacing the rage in his eyes. "Please, I'm bleeding. I need help." Anna walked down from the porch, the shotgun still in her hands. She looked at Silas, this man who'd tormented her for years, who'd tried to sell her like livestock, who'd left her to freeze to death. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just emptiness where he used to occupy space in her heart. "You're not worth the bullet," she said flatly. She turned to Ethan. The marshal wanted him alive. "We'll tie him up and send word to Silver Creek." The man Anna had wounded was sitting on the ground, holding his bleeding arm. The one who'd been thrown from his horse was limping away into the forest. Ethan kept his rifle trained on Silas, while Anna fetched rope from the cabin. Together, they bound Silas's hands and feet, then dragged him to a tree and secured him there. Silas glared at Anna with pure hatred. "You'll regret this. You'll end up alone and worthless, just like I always said." Anna crouched down to his eye level. "I already proved you wrong about everything else. I survived the avalanche you left me in. I built a life you said I'd never have. And I found people who see my worth without me having to beg for it. You're the one who's worthless, Silas. You always were." She stood and walked away, leaving him tied to the tree. The wounded man had fled on foot, following his companion into the forest. Their horses stood confused and riderless. Ethan caught them and led them to the small corral behind the cabin. Inside, Anna's hands finally started to shake. The adrenaline that had kept her steady during the confrontation drained away, leaving her hollow and exhausted. She sat down heavily in a chair, the shotgun across her lap. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You did good," he said quietly. "You faced him and you won." Anna looked at him, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't think I could do it. I thought when I saw him again, I'd turn back into that scared girl. But I didn't. I stood my ground, because you're not that girl anymore. You haven't been for a long time." They sent the young trapper to fetch the marshal. While they waited, they took care of Silas's shoulder wound, not out of kindness, but because they needed him alive to face justice. Silas cursed and threatened, but his words had no power anymore. They were just the ravings of a broken man facing consequences he'd spent years avoiding. Marshal Hewitt arrived before sunset, with 4 deputies. He took custody of Silas and the horses, listening carefully as Ethan and Anna recounted what had happened. The marshal nodded grimly. Attempted murder, attempted kidnapping, assault. He'll hang for this, or spend the rest of his life in territorial prison. Either way, he won't trouble you again. Anna watched as they loaded Silas onto a horse, his hands bound, his shoulder bandaged. He looked smaller somehow, less dangerous, just a pathetic drunk who'd finally run out of people to hurt. As they rode away, Anna felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was finally over. The ghost that had haunted her was laid to rest. That night, Anna and Ethan sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The air was soft with the promise of true spring. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, lonely and beautiful. Ethan had pulled 2 chairs outside, and they sat in comfortable silence, letting the peace settle over them. Finally, Anna spoke. "Earlier, before Silas came, I was trying to tell you something." Ethan turned to look at her, his expression gentle. "I remember." Anna took a breath, gathering her courage. "I said I chose this place, but what I really meant was, I choose you. Not because I need you to survive, but because I want you in my life. Because you make me believe I can be more than what I was. Because when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you in it." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "When Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. I thought I'd used up my chance at happiness, and the rest was just marking time until I could join her. But then I found you, and you reminded me that life keeps going, that there's always another chance if you're brave enough to take it." He stood and pulled her gently to her feet. In the starlight, his face was soft with emotion. He no longer tried to hide. "I love you, Anna, not as a replacement for what I lost, but as something new. Something that's ours and no one else's." Anna's breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her before. Not her mother, not anyone. She'd gone her whole life believing she was unlovable, unworthy. And here was this man, strong and good and kind, telling her she was enough. More than enough. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't think I knew how, but you taught me." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle as falling snow. "Then marry me. Not because you need protection or a home, but because you want to build a life with me. Because you choose this, choose us every day." Anna smiled, tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears, clean tears, the kind that washed away old pain instead of dwelling in it. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. But Anna wasn't fragile anymore. She'd been tested by cold and cruelty and had come through it stronger. She kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and gratitude into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We'll do it properly. Ride down to Silver Creek and find a preacher. Let the whole town know you're choosing this freely." "I'd like that," Anna said. "I want everyone to know I'm not running anymore. I'm standing still because I found where I belong." The days that followed were filled with preparation and joy. They rode to Silver Creek, and Anna stood tall in the general store, ordering fabric for a wedding dress. The shopkeeper, an older woman who remembered Anna from before, looked at her with new eyes. "You look well, dear." "Happy?" "I am," Anna said simply. "For the first time in my life, I really am." The wedding was held in a small church at the edge of town. Marshal Hewitt gave Anna away, having taken a grandfatherly interest in her well-being. A handful of townspeople attended, curious about the girl who'd survived an avalanche and the hunter who'd saved her. But Anna didn't care about their curiosity. She only had eyes for Ethan, standing at the altar in his best shirt, his hair tied back, his face radiant with love. When the preacher asked if she took this man as her husband, Anna's voice rang out clear and certain. "I do." And when Ethan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, Anna felt something click into place. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a partner, a home, a future stretching out before her, full of possibility. They returned to the cabin as husband and wife. Spring had fully arrived, transforming the harsh winter landscape into something green and alive. Anna planted a garden, her hands working the soil with reverence. Ethan built a small addition to the cabin, a room that could serve as a workshop or, someday, a nursery. One morning, Anna stood in the doorway watching Ethan chop wood. The sun caught his hair, turning it copper. His movements were strong and sure. He looked up and caught her watching, and the smile he gave her was full of such warmth it made her chest ache. She thought about the girl she'd been, frightened and worthless in her own eyes. That girl had died in the Avalanche, buried under tons of snow and ice. The woman who'd emerged was forged by cold and pain and the stubborn refusal to give up. She'd learned that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding reasons to live. A year later, as snow began to fall again on the mountains, Anna stood in the same spot where Ethan had first found her. But this time she wasn't alone and afraid. She held the hand of a small child, bundled against the cold, a daughter with her mother's grey eyes and her father's quiet strength. Behind them, Ethan stood watch, his rifle slung across his back, his presence a constant source of protection and love. Anna looked at the place where she'd nearly died and felt gratitude instead of fear, because that moment of desperation had led her here, to this life, to this family. She'd been broken by cruelty and rebuilt by kindness. She'd lost everything and gained more than she'd ever imagined possible. As they walked back to the cabin, Anna whispered a prayer of thanks. Not to the God the preacher talked about, but to the mountain itself, to the snow and the cold and the moment of chance that had put Ethan on that ridge at exactly the right time. To the avalanche that had buried her old life and forced her to dig out a new one. Inside the cabin, a fire burned warm and bright. Soup bubbled on the stove, filling the air with the smell of home. The child played on a rug made from deer hide, her laughter like bells. And Ethan pulled Anna close, kissing her temple, reminding her without words that she was loved, valued, home. The mountains stood eternal outside their door, beautiful and terrible and unforgiving. But inside, 4 walls held everything that mattered. Love hard-won, peace hard-earned, a life built from the ashes of despair. Anna Wolfpaw, once Anna Corbett, once a girl left to die in the snow, had survived. More than that, she had thrived. And on quiet nights, when the wind howled and the snow fell, she would hold her daughter close and tell her the story of how sometimes the coldest moments lead to the warmest hearts. How sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. How sometimes, when you're buried in darkness and can't see any way out, someone will dig through the snow and whisper the words that change everything. Hold on tight. 2 years had passed since Anna Wolfpaw stood at the altar and chose her future. The cabin had grown, not just in size but in spirit. A new room extended from the eastern wall, its logs still golden and fresh compared to the weathered grey of the original structure. A small barn stood where there had once been only a lean-to, housing 2 milk cows, a handful of chickens, and the 3 horses that had become essential to their livelihood. Anna stood at the stove, her hands working dough for the morning bread. Her daughter, 2-year-old Sarah, named for the woman who'd never met her, but whose love had shaped the man who'd become her father, played on the floor with wooden animals Ethan had carved. The child's laughter filled the cabin with a music that had been absent for too long. Her dark hair fell in curls around her face, and when she smiled, Anna saw both herself and Ethan reflected back. The door opened and Ethan entered, carrying an armload of firewood. Behind him came someone unexpected, a girl, perhaps 16, thin as a rail and covered in trail dust. Her dress was torn at the hem, her shoes barely holding together. But it was her eyes that caught Anna's attention. They held the same haunted look Anna remembered seeing in her own reflection years ago. The look of someone who'd learned too young that the world could be cruel. Ethan set down the wood and turned to the girl. "Anna, this is Mary Fletcher. I found her on the North Trail. Her wagon broke down about 5 miles from here." Anna wiped her hands on her apron and approached slowly, not wanting to startle the girl. Mary's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in every detail, calculating exits and threats the way animals did when cornered. Anna recognized that behavior too. "You're welcome here, Mary. Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head, but her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, and Anna saw her wince. Someone had hurt her, and recently. Anna's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice gentle. "Ethan, could you watch Sarah for a moment? Mary, why don't you come sit by the fire? You must be cold." Mary hesitated, then moved to the chair Anna indicated. She sat on the very edge, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Anna poured hot water into a basin and brought it over, along with clean cloths. "May I look at your injuries? I promise I'll be gentle." For a moment, Mary's eyes filled with tears she fought to hold back. Then she nodded, just barely. Anna carefully helped her remove the torn shawl. Underneath, bruises bloomed across her arms in the distinct shape of fingers. Someone had grabbed her, held her too tight. Anna's own memories rose up, but she pushed them down. This wasn't about her past. This was about Mary's present. As Anna cleaned the dirt from Mary's cuts and bruises, the story came out in fragments. Mary's father had died in a mining accident. Her mother had remarried quickly, needing a man to support them. The stepfather seemed kind at first, but after the wedding his true nature emerged. He drank, he raged, he blamed Mary for every difficulty. When Mary's mother died from pneumonia that winter, the stepfather decided Mary was a burden he no longer wanted to carry. "He sold you," Anna said quietly. "It wasn't a question." Mary nodded, tears finally spilling over. "To a man heading north to the logging camps. Said he needed a wife to cook and clean. But the way he looked at me, I knew what he really wanted. When we stopped to fix the wagon wheel, I ran. Just grabbed what I could and ran into the trees. I've been walking for 2 days." Anna finished bandaging a particularly deep cut on Mary's forearm. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you here." Mary looked at her with desperate hope. "You'll let me stay. I can work. I'm good at sewing and cooking, and I don't eat much, and I won't be any trouble. I promise." The words tumbled out so fast they ran together, and Anna's heart broke for this girl, who thought she had to earn the right to basic kindness. She took Mary's hands in hers. "You don't have to earn your place here. You're welcome because you're a person who needs help. That's reason enough." Mary stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "I don't understand. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Anna glanced at Ethan, who stood nearby holding Sarah. He gave her a small nod, understanding passing between them. Anna turned back to Mary. "Because someone helped me once, when I had nowhere else to go. And because no one should have to face the world alone." Over the following days, Mary slowly began to relax. She still startled at sudden movements and kept her back to walls, but the constant tension in her shoulders eased. Anna taught her to make bread that rose light and fluffy, to identify edible plants in the forest, to read the weather in the clouds. Ethan showed her how to handle the horses gently, how to check the chickens for eggs without frightening them, how to stack wood so it would stay dry. Sarah, with the uncomplicated acceptance of children, adopted Mary immediately. She would toddle after the older girl, chattering in her baby language, demanding to be picked up and carried. And Mary, who'd been treated like a burden her whole life, blossomed under the child's affection. She would carry Sarah on her hip, singing soft songs Anna had never heard. Songs Mary's mother must have taught her before she died. One evening, as they all sat around the table after supper, Mary worked on mending one of Ethan's shirts while Anna carved wooden spoons. Sarah had fallen asleep in Ethan's arms, her small fist clutching his collar. The fire crackled peacefully. Outside, an early autumn rain pattered against the roof. Mary set down her sewing and looked at Anna. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. How did you know you could trust him?" Mary gestured toward Ethan. "After everything you'd been through, how did you let yourself believe he wouldn't hurt you?" Anna considered the question carefully. It was one she'd asked herself many times in those early days. "I didn't at first. I waited for him to show his true nature, to demand payment for his kindness. But days turned into weeks and he never did. He gave me space when I needed it, helped when I asked, and never expected anything in return. Eventually I realized I was waiting for something that wasn't going to happen. He was exactly who he appeared to be, a good man who believed in doing right." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But trust isn't something someone else can give you. It's something you have to choose even when you're afraid." You have to decide that the risk of being hurt again is worth the chance of finding something real. Mary was quiet for a long time. I want to believe that. I want to think there are good people in the world. But every time I start to hope, something happens to prove I was wrong. Ethan spoke up, his voice gentle so as not to wake the child in his arms. That's because you've been surrounded by the wrong people. But Mary, I promise you, there's a whole world out there full of folks who'll treat you right. You just haven't had the chance to meet them yet. Tears slid down Mary's cheeks. What if I'm broken? What if what happened to me ruined me for anything good? Anna moved to kneel beside Mary's chair. Listen to me. You're not broken. You're hurt, yes. Scared, absolutely. But broken? No, broken things can't grow, can't change, can't heal. And you're doing all three. I can see it happening. Mary wiped her eyes. How long did it take you to stop being afraid? Anna smiled sadly. I still get afraid sometimes. The difference is now I have people who stand with me when I am. Fear doesn't go away completely. You just learn to carry it better. The weeks turned into months. Mary grew stronger both in body and spirit. Her laughter came easier. Her smiles reached her eyes. She started talking about the future with something that sounded like hope. Anna and Ethan never pushed, never demanded she make decisions before she was ready. They simply provided a safe harbor while she figured out who she was beyond her trauma. Then one morning, a rider appeared on the trail. He was young, maybe 20, with kind eyes and a nervous manner. He dismounted and removed his hat, addressing Ethan respectfully. Sir, I'm looking for a girl named Mary Fletcher. I was told she might be here. Mary had been feeding the chickens. At the sound of her name, she froze. Her face went pale. Anna moved to stand beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder. Ethan positioned himself between Mary and the stranger, his posture alert but not aggressive. Who's asking? The young man shifted his weight. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm Mary's cousin on her mother's side. When I heard what her stepfather did, selling her off like that, I came looking for her. Took me 3 months to track her trail. I want to help her if she'll let me. Mary stepped forward, studying him. Tommy, is that really you? I haven't seen you since I was 10. Thomas smiled, relief washing over his face. It's me, Mary. I'm sorry it took so long to find you. I've been working a claim in Nevada. Didn't hear about your ma passing until 2 months ago. When I found out what happened after, I knew I had to come. Mary looked at Anna, uncertainty in her eyes. Anna squeezed her shoulder. It's your choice, Mary. If you want to go with him, we understand. If you want to stay, you're welcome as long as you like. And if you're not sure, he can stay nearby while you decide. Thomas spoke up quickly. I'm not here to force anything. I just wanted Mary to know she's got family who cares about her. I've got a little house in Silver Creek now, gave up the mining life. There's room if she wants it and no expectations beyond that. Just family. Over the next few days, Thomas stayed in a boarding house in Silver Creek while Mary worked through her decision. She talked to Anna late into the night, weighing her options. She'd found safety here, learned what it felt like to be valued. But Thomas represented something she'd thought lost forever. Blood family, who wanted her not for what she could provide, but simply because she existed. What if I choose wrong? Mary asked one night as they sat together on the porch, watching stars emerge. What if I go with Tommy and it's a mistake? What if I stay here and wonder my whole life what might have been? Anna wrapped a blanket around both their shoulders. There's no wrong choice, Mary. Both paths lead somewhere good. Here you have people who care about you. With Thomas, you have family and a chance to build something new. Either way, you're not alone anymore. That's what matters. Mary leaned her head on Anna's shoulder. Will you be angry if I leave? After everything you've done for me? Never, Anna said firmly. Mary, you don't owe me anything. Helping you was never about putting you in my debt. It was about giving you what someone once gave me, a chance to heal and choose your own path. Whatever you decide, I'll be proud of you. In the end, Mary chose to go with Thomas. But it was a choice made from strength, not fear. She packed her few belongings, including a beautiful quilt Anna had made for her, and a carved wooden box from Ethan. Sarah cried when Mary said goodbye, clinging to her skirts, and Mary cried too. Promising to visit, As Thomas's wagon pulled away, Mary looked back one last time. Anna stood on the porch with Ethan and Sarah waving. Mary raised her hand in farewell, and Anna saw something in her face that hadn't been there when she arrived. Peace. The knowledge that she was worth loving, worth protecting, worth choosing after they disappeared down the trail. Anna turned to Ethan. "Do you think she'll be all right?" Ethan put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I think she'll be more than all right. She's got family now, people who'll look out for her. And more importantly, she's got something she didn't have before." "What's that?" "She knows her own worth. You taught her that. Whatever comes next, she'll face it knowing she deserves better than what her stepfather tried to give her. That's a powerful thing." Anna rested her head against his shoulder. "I was so scared when you brought her here. Scared I wouldn't know what to say, wouldn't be able to help. But seeing her leave today, strong and sure of herself, it felt right. Like something came full circle." "That's because it did," Ethan said softly. "You were given a second chance at life. Now you've given someone else the same gift. There's a rightness to that." That winter was harsh, testing even Ethan's extensive preparations. Snow piled higher than the windows. The cold was so intense that water froze solid within minutes of being drawn from the well. But inside the cabin, life continued warm and full. Sarah grew taller, speaking in full sentences now, asking endless questions about everything she saw. Anna taught her letters using a primer Ethan had brought from town. Ethan carved toys and told stories about the forest and its creatures. One evening, as Anna put Sarah to bed, the child asked a question that made Anna pause. "Mama, why do people hurt each other?" Anna smoothed her daughter's hair, considering how to answer. "Sometimes people are hurt themselves, and they don't know how to heal, so they pass that hurt along to others. It's not right, but it's what happens when pain goes unhealed." Sarah's young face scrunched with thought. "But you were hurt, and you don't hurt people. That's because I had help healing. Your father helped me, and I helped myself. When hurt gets treated with kindness instead of more hurt, it can turn into something better. Into strength, into wisdom, into the ability to help others. Like you helped Mary." "Exactly like that." Sarah yawned, her eyes growing heavy. "When I grow up, I want to help people too. Like you and Papa." Anna kissed her forehead. "Then you will, little one. Then you will." A spring returned, bringing with it new life and green growth. A letter arrived. It was from Mary, written in careful script that showed the education she'd been denied as a child, but was now receiving from Thomas's wife, a former schoolteacher. The letter spoke of a small house, a garden she was planting, a job at the general store that made her feel useful and valued. And at the end, words that made Anna's eyes fill with tears. "Thank you for showing me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to love you when you need it most. You saved my life, not just from danger, but from believing I wasn't worth saving. I carry that gift with me every day." Anna folded the letter carefully and placed it in the wooden box where she kept her treasures. Her mother's last letter, now yellowed with age, the silver button from her baby gown, a pressed wildflower from her wedding day, and now this, proof that kindness could echo forward, creating ripples that touched lives beyond her knowing. That afternoon, Anna worked in the garden while Sarah played nearby. The sun was warm on her back, the soil rich and dark beneath her fingers. She planted seeds for vegetables that would feed them through the next winter. Tomatoes, beans, squash, corn. Simple things, but essential. She thought about the girl she'd been, too afraid to dream of planting anything because she never knew if she'd be alive to see it grow. Now she planted with confidence, knowing she'd be here for the harvest. Knowing she had a home that no one could take from her, not because of walls and a roof, but because of the love that filled them. Ethan emerged from the barn, leading one of the horses. He'd been working on training it to pull a plow, preparing for the larger fields they planned to clear. He saw Anna in the garden and smiled, that soft expression reserved only for her and Sarah. He tied the horse and walked over, kneeling beside her in the dirt. "How's it looking?" "Good. Really good. We'll have more than enough to see us through winter and some to trade in town." He picked up a handful of soil, letting it sift through his fingers. "Remember when you first came here? You couldn't even stand without help. Now look at you, building a future one seed at a time." Anna sat back on her heels, looking at the land around them. The cabin solid and strong, the barn well-built and weathertight, the garden promising abundance, the mountains beyond beautiful and eternal, and beside her the man who taught her that love didn't have to hurt, that home could be a place of peace instead of pain. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that day?" she asked. Ethan considered the question. "Sometimes, but not in a sad way, more in a grateful way. Grateful for whatever twist of fate put me on that ridge at exactly the right moment. Grateful that I listened to the instinct that told me to investigate. Grateful that you were strong enough to survive until I got there." He took her hand, dirt and all. "You know what Sarah asked me yesterday? She asked why some people don't have homes. I told her that sometimes life is hard and things go wrong. She said, 'Then we should help them, Papa, like you helped Mama and Mama helped Mary.' She's got your heart. Anna, your strength and your compassion." Anna felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind that came from overwhelming gratitude. "She's got your wisdom and your kindness. She's going to be remarkable." "She already is," Ethan said. "Just like her mother." They sat together in the garden, hands joined, watching Sarah chase butterflies through the new grass. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth and coaxing life from dormant seeds. Somewhere in the forest, birds sang. Somewhere in the distance, a creek rushed with snowmelt. And in this small corner of the vast wilderness, a family that had been built from broken pieces lived and loved and thrived. That night, after Sarah was asleep and the fire burned low, Anna stood at the window looking out at the stars. Ethan came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. They stood like that, silent and content, two people who'd found in each other what the world had tried to deny them. "Do you ever miss the before?" Ethan asked quietly. "The time when life was simpler, when you didn't have responsibilities and people depending on you." Anna turned in his arms to face him. "Never. That wasn't simpler. It was emptier. This life, with its challenges and responsibilities and hard work, it's fuller than anything I could have imagined. I'd choose this every single day." Ethan smiled and kissed her forehead. "A good answer." They went to bed, exhausted from the day's work, but satisfied in a way that went deeper than tiredness. And as Anna drifted off to sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain and the fear, yes, but also the courage she'd found buried beneath it. The kindness that had saved her. The love that had remade her. In her dreams, she was back in the snow, buried beneath the avalanche. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she could hear voices calling her name. Ethan's voice strong and sure. Sarah's voice bright with laughter. Mary's voice grateful and free. And her own voice, no longer frightened or uncertain, calling back through the darkness. "I'm here. I'm alive. I'm home." She woke to dawn light streaming through the window and the sound of Sarah singing in the next room. Another day beginning, full of ordinary miracles. Bread to bake, animals to tend, a garden to water, a child to teach, a husband to love. Simple things that added up to a life worth living. Anna rose and dressed, ready to face whatever the day would bring. Because she'd learned something essential in her journey, from that frozen mountain to this warm cabin. She'd learned that survival wasn't enough. You had to choose to truly live, to open your heart despite the risk, to believe that the world held more light than darkness. And on this bright spring morning, with her family around her and the future stretching out full of promise, Anna Wolfpaw knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. She'd chosen life. She'd chosen love. She'd chosen to become more than her pain. The avalanche had tried to bury her. Instead, it had planted her. And now, 2 years later, she was blooming. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.